down kind of like high-end Mexican food, which is
Oh, that's
kind of a
good to
funny
know.
anomaly, but it's delicious.
Good. Welcome to Behind the Pages. Louise Miller is with us today to talk about her novel, The City Baker's Guide to Country Living. Louise is a pastry chef, as is her main character in the book. The main character is leaving Boston as the novel opens, and she thinks she's going on just a brief hiatus to a country town in Vermont, but then as time passes begins to realize that she is feeling a sense of home that she's not felt in her adult life, and needs to decide if she is going to make this her permanent home. Welcome, Louise.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the book? What's the name of your main character, and where do we find her as the novel opens?
So my main character's name is Olivia Rawlings, and when the book opens, she is kind of just in her regular life baking she's a pastry chef at a private club in Boston. And she, in the first paragraph, you get to see that she's having a relationship with a married man who happens to be the president of the club, and her life is just a bit of a mess. And she has an accident that causes her to kind of pack her dog up and flee to her best friend in northern Vermont.
As the book, at the very beginning of the book, when she's still at the Emerson Club, where she is a pastry chef, she kind of we find her sort of looking around the kitchen and saying that it's very comforting to her to see the uniformity of a kitchen, no matter what a restaurant looks like. The kitchen is usually pretty much uniform in most restaurants. Does she like this? Does she like the sameness of her job and her setting?
Yeah, I think it's very comforting for her. She's someone that is not really familiar with commitment, so she's bounced around to a lot of jobs, and she's been on her own since she was 16. But there's that, I think that's like the grounding force in her life is both her talent in her work, and also just that she really knows she could go anywhere and know how to function. You know, she knows the rules of a kitchen very well, and she can kind of step into any kitchen and do her job and know that she'll do well. And I think that's the only part of her life where she has that confidence.
I was just going to say that, the other parts of her life, she's not doing so well.
No.
But one thing she seems confident of, and with good reason, is her baking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Olivia exits the kitchen holding the big baked Alaska that she's bringing, out to the restaurant, out to the patrons, and it's meant to be a celebration. So it's a flaming Alaska.
Baked Alaska.
Yeah. So it's flaming. She brings it out and starts to realize this is too heavy. She's starting to wobble. She drops it at the moment that she's looking at this man she's having an affair with, who's there with his wife that night. Did that have anything to do with her dropping the tray?
I think definitely. It's funny, that's like a fun hot topic of whether she dropped it on purpose or not. Yeah, I think it's a moment of clarity for her where she's someone that really kind of keeps herself busy and is very impulsive and keeps moving forward. And it's a moment of seeing her lover with his family, and her really being the help. She's really in the moment, just kind of a moment of the reality of her situation, but I think she really feels it in that moment. And it's, it's very crowded room and this heavy flaming dessert. And I think she just loses, as just a moment of like, what? And everything falls apart.
Right. At that moment too, do you get the sense that she has any feeling of sympathy for the man's wife?
I think that comes later. I think that she's someone that she really doesn't put a lot of thought into, kind of big picture thinking. I think it's very much in the moment, and very much thinking about, what's going to bring her happiness or what's going to bring her distraction in the moment. I think a big part of the arc of the book is her starting to see herself in the context of a community and of family and of other people. And I think that's kind of an unfolding for her to see her impact on other people and to see, you know, how we relate to each other and how we need each other, but also to see, you know, there's kind of some damaging moments.
Really to see the effect of our behavior on other people, I think is what what evolves in her, in the novel.
Yeah, that's great. That's definitely what I tried to do. But yeah, it's interesting. There's the first moment that Livy sees Jameson and his wife is that moment at the beginning of the book. And then there's another moment later on where she sees them again. And I think it's when she starts to really have sympathy for the wife and to realize, you know, her role in, you know, causing some pain.
She heads out. Well, I don't think it gives away anything in the book to say, in dropping this flaming dish, it catches a tablecloth on fire, so there is a small fire, which means that the restaurant has to be closed for a few weeks, and so she leaves. She heads up north to Vermont and tries to use, she stops at a truck stop, our favorite place that she had been to before, and tries to use her credit card to pay for the dessert and a few little things that she bought. And her credit card is rejected. Is this how she runs her financial life?
Yeah, it's kind of how she runs everything in her life. I think it's all as catch can. So yeah, that was definitely a moment where I feel like this part of her life, everything's kind of catching up with her a little. She's always managed to stay like a step ahead, and suddenly she can't.
Yeah. And she shows up at Hannah's, at her friend Hannah's house. This has been clearly a very good friend, one of her best friends. She asked to stay for a few days. Hannah greets her at the door, kind of hands her, I think, a bottle of whiskey or something, you know, and says, "I'm going to bed," but or "Where's my pie that you brought me?" And then, you know, it goes off. But if we could ask Hannah at that point, what if she had any concerns about her friends, what would Hannah tell us?
I think Hannah wouldn't have been surprised at that moment. I think it's not the first time that Livy has shown up in the middle of the night, kind of needing some nurturing. So yeah, I think in some ways it's just the same, but I think that as they're getting older, Hannah's kind of, you know, the behavior that Livy had in her 20s is getting to look, you know, a little more worrisome in her 30s. So I think that she's definitely wondering, you know, when and if Livy's going to settle down and kind of shift gears.
And as much as Livy tries to assure her, "Oh, no, it's fine, I'm just here for a few days, nothing's wrong," Hannah really sees through that, doesn't she?
Yeah, definitely. I always picture Hannah's kind of just this one stabilizing person in Livy's life that she can kind of always count on. And also, she's kind of Livy's only witness because, you know, Livy will just kind of keep moving. And I always pictured Hannah really her only friend. She like Livy doesn't really stick around long enough or really have the tools to develop like real friendships. And so Hannah's kind of like her touchstone.
Olivia says that she hasn't told Hannah that the man that she is sleeping with is married because she knows Hannah would disapprove. What would Hannah's disapproval look like?
Oh, that's a fun question. I think that she'd just be really worried. And I think that she'd be really, I think her disappointment would be calling Livy out on, you know, what are you doing? You know, is this really what you want to do? Is this, you know, where are things headed here? You know, because I think Hannah really, really wants for Livy what she's found, which is a husband and family and roots and a place in a community. And I think that she's always really hoping that for her friend.
But she really wouldn't be judgmental, would she?
I don't think that she'd be really judgmental. I think that in that moment, Livy's really, it's her own judgment against herself. It's kind of her own shame, you know, that she's a little bit projecting onto Hannah.
Yeah. I mean, there was one funny scene, which again, you know, does not give away any of the plot, but where Hannah is warning Livy, you know, people talk around here. They talk about everything. And she talks about the time she went to a book group and had a second glass of wine, and that was 10 years ago, and still to this day when people say, "Oh, she's coming, we've got to buy some extra wine." So I think, you know, some of Hannah's concern might actually have to do too with knowing that they're not in the big city anymore either.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hannah would love Livy to stay, and at the same time, she really knows Livy enough to know that it would not be an easy transition for her or an easy fit because of those elements of like small town politics that she herself has experienced. Because the person that she married to is very established in the community. His family has been there for generations. So, so she went through her own kind of quieter version of what she knows what's in store for Livy if she does stay.
Yeah. I mean, does Livy know that she wants a home?
I don't think so. I don't think consciously. And I don't think she spends a lot of time dwelling in her unconscious. You know, like she's not a meditator. So, I don't think that she realizes it's like she doesn't, it's not even on the map for her. Like,
maybe partly too because she really hasn't had a home since she was a teenager.
Right.
And doesn't really know at this point what she's missing until she gets to this small little town.
Exactly. Yeah, she was raised by a single dad, so the home that she did have was kind of unusual and not very traditional. And she loses her dad when she's a teenager. And so, so family is just very much foreign. It's really foreign to her.
Olivia tells us that she doesn't get along with Hannah's husband, Jonathan, because they basically disagree on everything. Is Olivia the type that could keep her opinion to herself?
No, definitely not. No, she talks before she thinks, like most times.
Yes.
And I think probably Jonathan's a little bit like that. We don't see him too much, but they definitely butt heads.
That was certainly the impression I get, that she's a spontaneous person. I mean, I know Jonathan isn't a very important character in the book except through his relationship with his wife, but I certainly get the idea that it's not that hard to provoke Olivia.
Yeah, no. She'll definitely tell you what she thinks.
Right.
I really like the idea of, in my mind, Jonathan and Olivia are a little bit similar, and I like the idea of, like, women have such strong friendships, and I think it makes sense that they would be attracted to men if they were, if that's what they're looking for in a partner, that kind of reflected some of the things that they really love about their best friends. That's why I like the idea of them not getting along.
Right. Hannah tells Olivia about a job nearby in a country inn, which is the job of a pastry chef or a baker for the inn. So she goes to I should ask, when she first hears about the idea of this, what's her first reaction?
Her first reaction is just like, no way.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm ever moving to Vermont. She's just a city person. She's always been in the city, and I think she likes the anonymity of being in the city and kind of getting to do what she wants. And so, that's again not on the table for her in her mind.
Margaret, who is an important character in the novel, is the owner of this inn, the Sugar Maple Inn in Vermont. She interviews Olivia for the position, and she's definitely not warm and fuzzy at all.
True.
But on the other hand, we don't really know what she's thinking. If we could ask her at that first moment, when she first sees Olivia walk in with her funny dyed hair and all of that, if we could ask Margaret, what would she tell us her impressions of Olivia were?
I think that Margaret, that's a really fun question too. I think that Margaret is a little bit eye-rolly towards Livy. I think that she relates to Livy in a lot of ways. I think she sees a lot of herself, her younger self, in Olivia. I also think that Margaret's a control freak and is seeing someone that she knows isn't going to be very easy to control, and so that's a little concerning. But that's I love the two of them. I think my favorite scenes in the book are always when the two of them are in the room together.
Yes. In fact, I definitely. I think that Margaret has her doubts, like right from that first moment. But on the other hand, she would never be encouraging. I mean, she's kind of like, this is the job, you do it, that's it. And but that's the one thing Olivia is up for. I mean, she's up to that task, I should say. Of you need me to prove myself, I'll do it.
Right, right. Yeah, and she's a little shocked in that moment of having to prove herself because she thinks it's like, what is this place? And she's really used to being courted for jobs, and so this is an unusual situation for her.
Yeah.
And
actually, her demo is that she is to make a dessert while Margaret sits in a rocking chair with her close friend. The two of them sit in rocking chairs and just watch.
Right.
Is that intimidating for Olivia?
Yeah, definitely. And it's just, I think that she's so surprised in that moment that she needs to prove herself. I think that she has a little bit of an attitude, like, who are you? And it is unnerving to be watched, especially because she doesn't really understand what's going on here. I think the situation is so unfamiliar compared to, it's like the whole dynamics of a kitchen are the one thing that she's always been able to count on. And all of a sudden she's in this position where she's being judged by this woman. And
I wouldn't say she's eager to please so much as to prove herself, or would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think she's very much doesn't care if she pleases Margaret or not. And I think Margaret feels the same way. Margaret's not out to impress her or to woo her or to please Livy in any way.
Definitely has her doubts. At least in the beginning, until a few desserts come out of that oven, So actually, I think the first or second day of Olivia baking, she said that she had to make blueberry muffins several times because the oven is erratic. The flame on the top of the stove is, gets higher and low, just on its own without touching the knob. And Margaret walks in and said, "How's it going?" And she says, "Fine." Why doesn't she say, "This is not acceptable. I need a stove that works. I'm a baker"?
I think she sees Margaret as her equal, and so in that sense, she's not going to give Margaret any ground. Like, she wants to seem like she can do anything. She's perfectly capable of handling everything. So yeah, she just want to give Margaret.
Would she feel like she was kind of admitting weakness if she said,
"Yeah, exactly.
I need a stove that works"?
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems to me too, in Olivia's life, she feels like she has to have a front all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. She uses humor to keep people at a distance. She uses her sarcasm to keep people at a distance. She uses her talent in a way to keep people at a distance. So she feels like, she's kind of created a world where she's a little bit untouchable. And also, I think it's, I could say from personal experience, being a pastry chef, you're usually on your own, and you're at work at off hours, and so you kind of create your own little world that you're the queen of, unlike the rest of the kitchen staff that works much more closely with each other. And so, so I think that she has a lot of tools to keep people at bay.
Margaret shows her the cabin where she can live because Olivia has her dog, and so it wouldn't be appropriate for her to stay in the small room in the inn. So she has a small sugar maple cabin, a cabin where maple syrup had been made. Anyway, when Margaret shows her around, Olivia kind of takes a look at it and realizes she wants to be there. What does she see in that cabin that makes her want to stay?
I think it's just this gut feeling of home. It's this like sweet little cabin in the woods that's all surrounded, it's all windows. It's just one room, but there's something about it that just feels like it could be hers. I think that she's never had something kind of so wonderful offered to her before, and I think in that moment, until she sees that cabin, she's not really interested. But the idea of the job coming with this space, it's the first little taste of her recognizing that she wants a home. And so I always reckon it to, there's those moments where you see something that feels like you dreamt it, or like you see something that's just from your fantasies and it's real. And it's like one of those moments. I had a moment when I was in Western Mass that was like living in my book, and I was in about the middle of the first draft. And I went out to Asheville to visit a friend, and she taught yoga in the Grange Hall, the town Grange Hall. And I went to a class of hers on a Wednesday morning, and it was just her and me and 2 other people. And I'm lying in Shavasana on the floor of the Grange Hall, and the windows are open. And out of my left-hand window, I hear a rooster crowing. And out of the right-hand window, someone is practicing the fiddle. And I just felt like I was in my book. And it was that I had that one kind of moment of like, oh, you know, it was like
Had
a
you
thrilling.
already created those scenes in the book?
Yeah, I
Isn't
had.
that
It was
interesting?
absolutely the strangest thing. But it was that moment where I just felt so open and so like delighted, and that was like the feeling I was trying to capture when Livy sees the cabin. Is this like, you know, your heart just opening a little bit more and being like, oh, like,
Right, this is different than that apartment that I've just, you know, abandoned, you know. As she begins baking at the inn, Olivia still doesn't know if she's staying, nor does Margaret. Has Margaret even made a decision on whether she wants her to stay in any kind of permanent sense? But how seriously does Olivia take her job at that point?
I think she always takes her work seriously. She's always interested in doing her best job. And I think to a certain degree she's always interested in impressing people. So yeah, she'd never put out something that she felt was just so-so. Like,
Olivia meets her friend Hannah in a local bar because she wants to sort of have a sense of what the local life is like. And although she doesn't tell us this, you know, we sort of get the sense, at least as the reader, she's trying to figure out this community a little bit. You know, is this really someplace I can live, someplace I can be? Hannah tells her to. This is the time that Hannah tells her to be careful because people talk. You know, how much would it bother Olivia at this point to know people were talking about her? Because it turns out that they are.
I don't think it would bother her too much. I think a little part of her expects it. And I think at this point in the book, it's not too much of a bother to her. Like, you know, she knows it's a small town. She kind of assumes, and she knows through Hannah.
I don't think she thinks that she's going to be around these people. Or she hasn't made that decision, certainly. I mean, at this point, I think she's thinking of this as temporary.
Very
as
temporary.
Everything else in her life has been, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's always been temporary.
So it doesn't really occur to her if she burns any bridges that she might need those bridges someday, because she doesn't stay in places that long.
Right. Yeah, she's never really had to face that before. So Margaret asks Olivia to make cookies for it's supposed to be a library fundraiser, but let's face it, it's a big competition. Right.
So if we could, and it's important to Margaret that her inn sort of always be the winner in any kind of contest, and we'll get into the apple pie part of that in a second, but these cookies, how important is it to Margaret, how confident, I should say, is Margaret at this point in Olivia's ability to nail it?
I think Margaret feels pretty confident, and Livy feels really confident, just because she has all sorts of assumptions about what people can do, and her assumptions about her own abilities, and always being the best. But I think Margaret,
she's beginning to.
Her confidence is pretty high. She's starting to have some buy-in with Livy, and she wants it. She wants that win. So that's a big part, like, of her. She's kind of, you know, put her money towards Livy, and I think she's really hoping for a good outcome.
And in fact, because it's not technically a contest, the only way they know who kind of basically won is who raised the most money with their cookies. But well, we won't get into giving everything away. But throughout the book, sort of a very big build-up is this apple pie baking contest that happens. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I could tell you about it in the book, and I could tell you about it in real life.
Okay.
So, in the book, a big arc that really covers the whole book is that the reason Margaret needs a baker is because everyone in her family has always won the Coventry County apple pie contest. Just generations of people in her family have won. And she has won herself for years, and she's started to lose, and she's won second place the last 3 years. So she's just really like hell-bent on getting her first place position back. And Livy doesn't know this right away, but she finds out pretty early that Margaret has kind of ulterior motives. It's not just making desserts for the inn. And so for me, it was, well, I'll tell you, a big inspiration for the book was it was a long time ago, it was like 1999 or so. I had entered the Topsfield Pear apple pie contest. And I had, I just dropped the pie off and, went and pet the goats, saw the giant pumpkin, had a really fun day at the fair. And they had said, come back at 7 and we'll announce the winners. So I went back at 7. And it's in the Arts and Crafts building, which is this big kind of beautiful wooden building. And there's a professional kitchen, and it's separated from the rest of the building by a glass wall. So I walked in the Arts and Crafts building, and there were like 100 bakers all gathered around the glass wall. And it was, in my memory, that it was dead silent. And all of them were just watching 3 judges eat pie. And I had, until that moment, had absolutely no idea how competitive the contest was. And so it ended up that year had been a record number of pies. And so the judging went very late. And I couldn't shake that image. I carried that image around with me for 10 years. And it just started all those little questions of like, what can be at stake? And like, why do people care so much? It was, to me, it was like a delightful thing to do. It was like a fun country thing to do, and I loved baking. But it started to make me realize like it could mean a lot more to a lot of different people, and it probably meant something different to every single one of those people to win. And so that contest really inspired me to write the book. I knew from the beginning that there was a contest at the end, but it was funny, throughout my whole entire first draft, I didn't know why Margaret was losing. And so I kept writing, hoping it would come, and it finally came.
Yeah, that was great
which
too.
was really fun.
That we won't give away.
But I love, I think in any place, there's certain traditions, within a town that have a lot of meaning for the community, and for Margaret and for her rival in baking. The contest means a lot more than just a ribbon. So.
Tell us, just, we have only a minute left, but I want you to just very briefly tell us in what way, pick one thing in which you and Olivia are alike.
Interesting. We're not very much. We're mostly just bakers. I don't think we have too much more than that.
You're a little bit more efficient about how you run your life.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm much less impulsive. And we were both raised by single dads.
Oh, okay. So all right. There's enough. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. Unfortunately, we are out of time.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
I really loved reading your book and enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you. No, I loved it. It was great. It's like so much fun to get to talk about it.
You have been watching Behind the Pages from the staff of 22 City View. I'm Diane Goshgarian. Thank you. Yeah, that was really fun.
Great.
So getting into the inside world of baking and,
Yeah, no, it's so fun.